I'm excited to be here with you. Just give me a moment to get these lights squared away. As you guys can see, I've got lights going everywhere. So go ahead, and while I'm getting my lights squared away, they were actually doing some major work to our carpets here in the office. And so I've been moving around this morning trying to get a solid spot. Didn't know that that was on the agenda and scheduled for 11 a.m. So, but anyway, we got a great conversation, great show for you guys. Go ahead, tag a friend, drop your comments in the chat, what city and what state you're watching from, and give me less than 60 seconds, and we will be right back in front of you. And I've got an amazing guest today. All right. I'll see you guys in about 60 seconds. I actually intended to be um, without my hat and so forth, but nevertheless, the type of conversation we're having today is going to be amazing. And I felt as if I needed to somewhat dress for the part today. So yeah. So again, got my green beanie on, got my fatigue shirt on, and if I could, I could show you my Pumas that I got on as well. Those are fatigue as well. I don't think I can get my Pumas up here on the camera. Well, I guess I could. Well, no, I can't. But anyway, all right. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started by bringing on the guests that we have. But listen, as we bring on today's guest, this is what I need for you to do. I need for you right now, if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and share the link to this broadcast. Number two, if you're watching us on Facebook, go ahead and tag someone, especially someone under the age of 40. Go ahead and tag them. Say, hey, you need to hear this conversation. Got it? So I'm bringing to the screen today none other than the princess of the castle, the princess of the Benjamin Castle, Princess Destiny Gabrielle. Hey, sweetheart.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. It's good to see your face,
Good to see you too.
and always good to hear your voice. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Had
You
one
good?
class this morning. So, yeah. How are you
Any
doing
more
today?
classes? Any more classes today?
Yeah, I have one later on around 3:30, but it's more relaxing. So, it's just a writing class.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, my day is gonna be still busy here. A lot of stuff going on. We have the master class next weekend, and
Hmm.
a lot of stuff going on at the office, construction and carpet cleaning, and just a whole lot of stuff. And so I wasn't aware that they were coming. At least, well, I knew they were coming Friday, but from what I was told, it was gonna be early Friday morning. So I
Hmm.
got here at 11, like, okay, cool. Well, 11:30, like, okay, cool, and they were still here. Now, mind you, they did an amazing job. I mean, just a fantastic job. I mean, cleaning. But anyway, so I was moving around trying to get the right spot where the floor wasn't wet, and so now I'm at the desk and I've been in one spot, and I got to tiptoe, on the way going out. For those of you who are 80s, maybe 70s babies and 80s babies, you guys know if you walk on your mama's floor and that floor is wet, it's getting ready to be fire. So I kind of had that experience, like I'm tiptoeing on Mama's or Mary's floor, trying to get off and not mess up the floor. But listen, go ahead, drop in the chat what city. We still got Tucson in the house, New York's in the house. Charlotte's in the house. Thank you. And let us know what platform you're watching on. Let us know what platform. Are you on YouTube? Are you on Facebook? My personal page, etc. And Destiny, you could go ahead and share it to your page as well if it popped up. It should have popped up on yours as well. You can share it. Uh, so we're going to get ready to get started in this conversation. So Destiny, take about 30 seconds to a minute and just introduce yourself to our Facebook audience. Most of the people who know your mom and I on Facebook, they kind of know a little bit about you. But of course, people are added, followers, new followers come. They may not know about Destiny Benjamin. So for someone who doesn't know Destiny, how would you introduce yourself?
Okay, so my name is Destiny Benjamin. I'm 19 and I'm a first year at Duke University. I'm definitely majoring in African and African American studies and sort of deciding sort of the major minor combination if I want to add on poli-sci, political science, and sociology. I am interested and involved in a lot of Black Student Alliance clubs. So in high school, I was president of the NAACP at our school, and here at Duke, I'm involved in the programming committees of Black Student Alliance and Black Women's Union, as well as the Advocacy and Black Caucus Committee. I play basketball in my free time, and I am the founder of What's Our Destiny, which is a blog that highlights both the challenges and successes of the Black community in both the past and present as we look towards a brighter future. So I would say that encompasses Destiny and just a sort of background on my life and what I've done thus far. I think you are muted.
I need y'all to pray for me. I've got like 25 moving parts, and that was the carpet guy knocking on the door, giving me some instructions. But Destiny introduced herself, first year student at Duke, African American studies major, potentially poli sci, sociology minor, involved in a lot of activities, focusing on African American empowerment, education, fun, entertainment, that kind of thing. So we're excited. We just, on our end, your mom and I would just be praying like, Lord, this girl gonna get involved in every single activity and club she could possibly get, you know. But yeah. So with that being said, just kind of jumping into some sort of our narrative today. You mentioned about the blog, but you have this blog. Talk to us just for a moment about the blog, because we're getting ready to start talking about uh I almost titled this, and you can tell me if you like it or not, The Miseducation of Malcolm and Martin. The Miseducation
Yeah.
of Malcolm and Martin. What do you think about
No,
that? What do you
that's
think about
good.
that title?
I like that
You know,
title. I was
you need
actually
to
just
you need to write a
reading.
book about
Oh,
that.
sorry. Yeah, I was
I
just
think, no,
reading The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson.
Carter G. Woodson. That's a
So I
classic.
haven't finished it, but I've read some of it.
Listen, now some of you guys.
You muted yourself again. This
Y'all
technology.
y'all not praying for me. Y'all not praying for me today. I'm convinced y'all are not praying. Y'all, I'm okay. Okay, but anyway, so for those who are under 50, they remember the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. I think that was one of her
uh,
most
I remember
popular
it
albums.
too. I'm just saying.
Okay, I will. You say you remember it? No,
Well,
you're
I
living
know
it.
what it
You
is.
know. But anyway, so before we get into the miseducation of Malcolm and Martin, just tell us a little bit about your blog. What's our destiny? Talk a little bit about that.
So I founded the blog in 2020, so very pivotal year. That was my first year serving on like leadership of NAACP, and it was also a transition point in my own ideologies. I realized that I needed to sort of combat these narratives that I was taught in high school of African American history, and so I started with Malcolm X because I feel like Malcolm X is the or the not the only, but one of the primary examples of a Black historical figure whose work and whose activism has been severely erased. And,
Right.
we've been miseducated about the work that he did. And so I read a lot of his books. I would listen to his speeches all the time, and just really delving deep into who he really was. And so he was a lot of the inspiration surrounding my blog. So a lot of what I do in my blog posts, I like to sort of attack what I've been taught in history classes and what key figures have been, or like key figures I haven't learned about and why I haven't learned about
Why
it.
you didn't learn
So in
about it?
my previous or my most recent blog post, Diary of an Angry Black Woman, were erased from history, and how a lot of times it's like because they were dark skinned. So you see that in the Montgomery bus boycotts, where Rosa Parks, a light skinned woman, was put as the picture in the face of the movement. When in reality, there were many women, a lot of them dark skinned before her, who also did the same, had the same efforts. And even Joanne Gibson Robinson, who was a dark skinned woman, who actually started the idea of the bus boycott 6 years before it even started. So yeah, a lot of that was a lot, but most of what I do on my blog is just sort of breaking down what we know and building it up into something that is more holistic of who our civil rights leaders and activists were.
So that's interesting. So you talked about a holistic approach and or a comprehensive approach, right?
Mhm.
And when I think about that, I think about um, narrative framing, right? How whoever is in power gets to choose how they're going to frame the narrative.
Mhm.
And as a result of that, for those of us who've been educated post 1970, after 1970, we experienced a reframing of the narrative around Malcolm and Martin, where the more sanitized statements of Martin was shared, and the more quote unquote volatile statements of Malcolm was shared. So it's like the goal of this narrative was to create these polar opposites and to create these contrasts and, in a sense, sanitize one, vilify the other. And as a result, we've overwhelmingly been miseducated. And I was miseducated. I mean, again, I'm thankful that I had some amazing principals and teachers in the 70s. I'm sorry, I wasn't in school in the 70s, but who were in their teenage years in the 70s, who were my teachers in school that helped us to dig through what was in the history books, right?
Mhm.
But in your case, you were overwhelmingly taught by white men and white women. You weren't overwhelmingly taught by African American men and women who were able to look at stuff in the history book and say, "Hold on for a second, that's not accurate. Hold on for a second, let's give more context." So, talk a little bit about your experience being in class in high school, being quote unquote, and I'm using this term in the literal sense, whitewashed about Malcolm and Martin. But then now, once you've done more study and more learning, getting this more comprehensive understanding of Malcolm and Martin, just talk for a moment about how you were in class, quote unquote, having this framed narrative around these figures. Just talk for a moment about that.
Yeah. So, like you said, growing up, I attended a lot of predominantly white institutions, and so I've only had one in my K through 12 schooling. I only had one Black teacher, and that was in physical science. So it
Now I'm
wasn't
gonna interject.
necessarily a
I'm gonna
history.
interrupt you for a second. Let your dad interrupt you for a second. Now you've used in the first, we've been on for about 10 minutes. You've already used ideology and institutions. So I think y'all kind of get a point of how our conversation is going to Benjamin House. And and you know, God has given us two bright children, and we're so thankful to God for it. And in this context, she's already used ideology and institution, and we're just 10 minutes in. So continue.
So I only had one Black teacher. So a lot of my history, or all of my history and English teachers, which I think is where you get a lot of, or where there's the potential to learn a lot about African American history, were white. And so I don't remember I don't think I ever directly learned about Malcolm X until APUS history. And even then, it's, the narrative we know, like he was a radical, he was for violence, things of that nature, and always as a point of comparison to Martin Luther King, who actually, like, even if you think about, we learn about Martin Luther King so much, but it's mostly just during the month of February. And even
Right.
then, we talk about 1963, the speech, I Have a Dream, and that's about it. You don't, maybe you get a little bit about the Montgomery bus boycott, but still, it's not that much. And so I think around junior year is when I started sort of going into like African American history as a whole. And then in senior year, I wanted to specifically target, not target, that sounds a little, not the word I wanted to use, but specifically look into individual Black figures like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. So that's who I've been really into right now. So reading directly from their autobiographies or through their speeches, getting books with compilations of their speeches and actually hearing from them instead of getting this second hand or multiple hands
Right.
from away from
Preparation
the
from,
actual
right.
source.
Right. And so with that being said, Destiny, I want to jump back to something you said and ask you, this is going to be off the cuff. So you didn't have a chance to prepare for this one. But you know how your dad rolls. So
Yeah.
I want you to ask the question honestly. There are some people who could be out there saying, well, she mentioned that she only had one Black teacher, while she was in high school. I mean, does it really matter? Does it matter that she only had one Black teacher? Uh, how do you respond to that opinion?
So I think I'm gonna do a little comparison. So from K through 12, I had one Black teacher or in classroom teacher, and then this year alone in college, I've had four Black teachers, two males, two females, and just the difference in. And so, if you want to look at African American Studies courses, so I had a white teacher for my African American Studies course in high school, and I feel like it's more calling a Black teacher. You sort of see that representation and see who they are, and you can then sort of have bigger aspirations within yourself. And then in regards to teaching, they have a firsthand experience of what it means to be Black. Therefore, they know better how to help their Black students. They know better how to teach lessons about Black history. And so seeing that, it's just, it really does change. So we were talking about actually in our class about Afrocentricity versus Eurocentricity. And so in our school or in our system, in our nation as a whole, it's largely Eurocentric. But when you add in an Afrocentric perspective to society, to education, then Black students are able to see that they can be more. And then white students see the impact that Black people have had on history. And so right now, with this Eurocentric view, it's been pushing this narrative, pushing this ideology that teaching Black students that, their history started with slavery, and showing white students that Black people have had to struggle and continue to struggle, and they struggle more. They have almost an incapability of being successful. And so, and the ones that are successful are just anomalies. So when you switch the perspective from Eurocentric to Afrocentric, then you see more positive viewpoints of Black people, and therefore eliminating stereotypes and this embedded racism that we have in the system. So whereas education isn't the sole area where we need to develop as a society, it's a place where we can begin to see changes if we just change how we're teaching our students. That was a
Well,
lot.
that's really good.
Did I
No, it was a lot.
answer
No, it was a lot, but it
the
was really
question?
good because you brought up, Eurocentrism, and Afrocentrism. And most people don't even realize that the goal of American education is to teach all of history from
Mhm.
a Eurocentric vantage point. Think about it. Uh, Math,
science, philosophy, all of these sciences we're taught that they begin with Greece, right? I mean, Hippocrates, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. I mean, that's what we're taught, that if you want to, that math came from the Greeks, that philosophy and science came from the Greeks, which, well, they weren't European, but they were definitely would be considered as, or, Europeans do consider themselves to have similar history. They're not talking history from a Afrocentrism perspective, because guess where the Greeks got their language, and not language, but their learning from? They got their learning from Africans. They got their learning from Africans. I'm gonna say it again for the third time. They got their learning from Africans. I mean, uh, Hippocrates, Aristotle. I mean, these men journey to Africa to learn from the African sages and read the African wisdom literature. For those of you who are Christians, the Old Testament, commonly called the Septuagint, was a Hebrew document translated into Greek by Greek men, and by Greek men they call it the 70, or the Septuagint, which means 70. But they translated it so that their people could what? Understand it. But guess what? You go back into antiquity, Greeks thought that the Old Testament scriptures were Greek scriptures. My point in saying that is, to your point, it matters because an African American teacher, professor, in most cases has a greater sensitivity to representation. Your mom is on representation matters. Okay, Omega, we got you. You know, but the African American teacher professor is able to bring a more holistic, comprehensive understanding of the role that black and brown people played in world history, and then American history particularly. So let me ask you this question, Destiny.
Oh, can I was going to say something
Go ahead,
really
go
quick.
ahead, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Just before we get off to a different topic, I think it's also, when you think about this Eurocentric view of in education, part of what is was in the system of slavery, you can't solely enslave a people through violence and through force. That's maybe how you can set up the system, but in order for the system to be maintained, you also have to develop or create this ideology so that it can continue even if the system is eradicated. So with the
Oh,
13th
so definitely,
Amendment,
definitely, definitely. As you continue, I've got to let this guy out the building. I told y'all I got a million and one things happening right now. My apologies. I want you to elaborate on that statement about what they have to do to continue the system. Elaborate on that, because I think that's where people miss the systemic racism dynamic, because they don't understand there has to be an undercurrent in the system that perpetuates what was started by violence. So talk about that just for a moment as you continue.
yeah, so it's actually kind of this term called hegemony, and I'm still sort of working through the definition of it. But like I was saying, you can't solely enslave a people through violence. There also has to be this underlying ideology that you're enforcing, that you're maintaining. And so you have to enslave both the body and the mind. And once the system is eradicated, so with the 13th Amendment, once slavery is, or enslaved persons are now free. Why is it that we still have systemic racism? Because there's this ideology perpetuated that Black people are unable to be successful. Black people's bodies are inherently built for manual labor. And so when you enact each of these ideologies, just these perceptions, these stereotypes of Black people into Black people's minds, as well as white people's or non-Black people's minds, then you're able to keep them in this sort of position or mindset of enslavement. So whereas now we're not, I wouldn't go as so far as to say like every single Black person is still enslaved in some sense. However, the systems that we still have in place, like the housing market, the medical field, etc., Black people are still facing discrimination and being these barriers to success in each of these fields because of the ideology that's in the minds of other non-Black people.
See, Destiny. One, you gave us another word. You threw out, homogeneity, and I was like, I was walking out the door
Or
like
hegemony. Sorry, I might have
hegemony.
mispronounced it.
Oh no, listen. In this context, when you're using a term, it's tomato right now. Listen, both are accurate. But most people don't realize, and most non-black people don't realize that narrative, that the goal of white supremacy is to create a world that is viewed as a European would, that is viewed as a white person would. That's the ultimate goal, is to create that. And that would be true. And that would be okay if America was all European. There would be nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with
Right.
that. I mean, you go to various countries across the world and they want, unfortunately, think about what's happening in Ukraine and Russia right now. I mean, the vast majority of people who are in Ukraine are Ukrainians. And that may not be the official term, but at least I'm close. And I'm certainly not disrespectful. But my point is, they think Ukrainian because that's their country. That's their country. They or someone of their quote unquote ancestry founded that country, that nation. But in America, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and the rest of the founders, these men did not found this country. Now listen, I get it. I understand. I know there's a flag, the star. I get it. But you got to hear what I'm saying, because we're going to transition this conversation over to why this leads us to Malcolm and Martin. But I need to help you understand. You don't exclude a people group who are here in just as many numbers as you are from the founding process and then say, we're creating a country for your benefit as well. That whole concept is a farce. The entire concept of, hey, let's exclude, Africans from the process. And you were telling us the other day, the official term, is it considered Native Americans? Is that the official
Yes.
term? Is that the correct authentic term? Native Americans were here. So if you're going to found a country on land that doesn't belong to you, then you need to have these other ethnic groups at the table of the founding to have an influence as to what the government looks like. So when you say we the people, it's not a lie with the first three words.
Yeah.
Because you're not saying we the people, you're saying we the white people, not we the Native Americans, not we the Africans who are here, but we the Europeans. This is the country we want to establish, even though we're going to exploit everybody else who's non-white and use them to build this country, and then in turn tell them you should love this country the same way we love it. Now, I'm not a hate America kind of dude. I'm not a burn the flag. I'm not that person. But what I am saying is, and I think it was what's your guy? The guy that moved to London or something. What's the guy? James Baldwin, right?
Yeah. All right.
James
He moved
Baldwin.
to Paris.
Yeah, Paris, right? James Baldwin says, because I love America as much as I do, I have a right to perpetually criticize her.
Mm-hmm.
Now, white people can criticize America, and we like, yes, they're being patriotic. Think about January 6th, 2021, right? They're being patriotic. I mean, but if black people do something like that, we're ungrateful. We are savages. We are go back to where you can't, all this foolishness, which in turn drives us to this narrative of where we are with Malcolm and Martin, and why Martin was quote unquote sanitized and Malcolm was vilified. So here's the question, Destiny. What is one of the greatest misrepresentations or errors or hidden truths about Malcolm that you discovered through your personal study and research? What's I mean, I know it's several things, but what are some of those things that just stand out like, okay, they didn't tell us that.
Yeah,
They
they didn't tell us a lot. They don't.
Really noted and correct.
What I noticed in Malcolm's story is that both Martin and Malcolm were killed at 39 years old. So that's pretty young. And
39.
especially considering the
I'm
amount of
42,
work they
Destiny.
did.
Princess, I'm 42 years old. That means I'm 3 years older than Malcolm and Martin, and they knew 90% more than what I know. But anyway, I continue. Yeah, I'm working
um,
on
what I noticed with Malcolm is the amount of transitions and transformations he had throughout his life. So we know him as Malcolm X. He was born Malcolm Little. He was also known, he had a point in his life. I sort of divide his transformations based on who he was called. And so, born Malcolm Little, he denounced his slave name when he converted to the Nation of Islam while in prison. But before he went to prison, he was Detroit Red. He was a hustler,
Detroit Red.
in the streets of Harlem. He was out there. Um, and then when he was in prison, he was known as Satan. And so he was not just non-religious, but he was anti-religious. And so, but then he had his conversion, Nation of Islam, he's Malcolm X. And then after separating from the Nation of Islam, so the Nation of Islam era is where we get most of our conceptions of Malcolm X, where they deem, which I still have critiques of how he was portrayed in the Nation of Islam, but we're taught that, he was a radical, he's for violence, white people are devils, that type narrative during the Nation of Islam. But after separating with the Nation of Islam, he goes to Mecca, converts to a more authentic version of Islam, and he comes back and he has this more global perspective of, so it's no longer the nation, of racism, of anti-blackness. So it's no longer, white people are devils. It's the white government has done this to us, and it's not individual white person.
Colonialism is the culprit.
It's no longer individual white person versus Black people. It's the government, it's the system, the white-led system that's perpetuating, the ideologies of anti-Blackness. And so he starts the Organization of Afro-American Unity, which is it's largely, he has sort of collaborations with global Islamic groups, but it's for non-religious Christians, etc., just any Black people, and just encouraging unity, solidarity. But he never gets to continue this organization because then they kill him. And so it's like,
so Justin, so talk about this for a second. You said they kill him. So for someone who's not familiar with, just maybe they've heard, well, he was killed, or when you say they killed him, give us some more detail about that.
Yeah, so he was killed by members of the Nation of Islam. However, I normally describe it or write about it. It was really just a race between the FBI and the Nation of Islam. Like, who was going to get him first?
Which is the same thing that happened with Martin.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's not, or when he left the Nation of Islam, it was very a tense situation. I don't think we had time to actually get into all the details, but he had a quote where he said, if a member of the Nation of Islam feels like Elijah Muhammad, or who was the leader at the time, or Allah told them to, which, separate, there needs to be a distinction between the Nation of Islam and authentic Islam. But right, if they told a member to kill someone, then they would do it. And so actually, I think it was maybe 5 or 6 days. It was essentially a week before he was assassinated. He did this speech at the Audubon Ballroom, which was also where he was killed. And it was largely talking about and exposing his experience in the Nation of Islam. And so a week later, at his next speech, where he was supposed to be introducing more about his organization, was when he was assassinated.
Listen, and surprisingly, all of the all of the city of New York police security, who was supposed to be on site, they just all went to lunch, for the lack of a better phrase. Everybody right, just mysteriously goes to lunch, right? Everybody goes to lunch. Hey guys, we all go to lunch, leave and go to lunch at 12:30. Let's go down to the burger shop and get some lunch. Everybody mysteriously leaves at the exact time, and his assailant, or his murderer, gets to walk in loaded, or it was a couple of them, and they assassinate him. And then the police come running back for lunch. Now I'm fictionalizing that dynamic, but the core is still true. All the security and the police security leave, and then they come back when shots are fired and everybody's running out of the ballroom. And one of the most amazing things for me was, Destiny, that when he was assassinated, his number one assistant was a city of New York informant. He
Yeah.
he was This guy is with you 24/7 basically, but he is hired by or recruited and paid by the city, by New York City Police Department investigative unit, and your job is to get all of this personal information about Malcolm and bring that to us. Are you kidding me? Okay, so listen, we got to move forward. So
Yeah.
question: why is it now you're a Christian? You believe in God, you believe in Jesus, and you don't believe in God and believe in Jesus because your parents believe in God, believe in Jesus. At least I don't think so. Am I correct about that?
No. Correct.
Okay. So you have your own personal relationship with God through Jesus, right? But
Yes.
Malcolm X didn't believe in God. Well, let me rephrase that.
No.
Malcolm X didn't believe in Jesus as God, and he certainly didn't believe in the white Christian form, or the white version of Christianity. And he had very good reasons to not believe in Christianity. Unfortunately, he had very good reasons because of what he experienced with his dad, with his mom, with his family, etc., which is part of the reason why they called him Satan in prison, right? When he was in prison.
Yes.
Uh, so, as a Christian who believes in God, believes in Jesus, who died and rose again for you, how do you rationalize, you know, Malcolm X and your respect for him with someone who shares the different religious views than you share?
Yeah. So I've sort of been grappling with this question. I think, well, one, my major point of difference and critique with Malcolm X is I don't agree with I respect his religious beliefs and his founding and his reasoning for being Islamic, but, we differ in that sense. Um, it's a hard question to answer. And I sort of, when I was thinking about the question, I was thinking also of how within Christianity, there's still differences in political beliefs and things of that nature. So I don't see it
Talk about
as
it.
me just like, I can disagree with anybody. I can disagree with another Christian's political beliefs.
You
I
disagree with me
can,
on many occasions.
yeah. We're gonna move on.
We're gonna move on. We're
I
gonna.
see. I disagree with it, or we don't see eye to eye. Or sort of speaking of him as if he's still alive. But, we may not be the same religiously, but I agree and understand a lot of his political beliefs. And going back to like disagreeing with a lot of Christians on political boundaries or barriers, I see, like, I'm not necessarily a proponent of like labels, like political labels, like Republican, conservative, Democratic, liberal. Because I
Right.
mean, you look at Martin and Malcolm; they highly criticize, white liberals, white moderates, Democrats, and Republicans, things of that nature. But I see within like the Republican / conservative party, I think a lot of their and not to generalize, but just some or most see Christianity as equivalent to Americanism, which is equivalent to, whether they admit this part or not, white supremacy. And so, and so, like, see, I don't know. I'm trying to set up like two different ways. So, like with
Got
Malcolm,
it.
I may disagree with him religiously, but I agree with his political beliefs. And then here, you can't just assume like just because someone's Christian, I'm going to agree with their political beliefs. I feel like when we put Christianity on an equal platform with Americanism and white supremacy, because of the system we're in, is a white supremacist system, then that's where more of your problems come in, rather than like I think you rarely see like Muslim people putting themselves or American Muslims in America equating their religion to Americanism. And I think you see that a lot in the Christian community. So I feel like I have more, in a sense, I have more
In
differences
common.
within the
Yeah.
Christian community, which is a whole problem in and of itself, than I do with someone of a different religion.
So basically what you're saying is it's possible to have a shared ideology, but not a shared theology.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And that's what we don't understand. We can have a shared ideology. I respect Malcolm X highly. I remember, those of you guys remember Denzel Washington played Malcolm X in the 90s. He killed it.
I remember
He
that too.
absolutely killed it. Right. But listen, the Godfather of Harlem, listen to me. The Godfather of Harlem, that dude that's playing Malcolm X in The Godfather of Harlem, he has killed the role. Nobody else needs to play Malcolm X except Malcolm X is resurrected. Like nobody tried. Like, no, if he's not playing Malcolm X, we don't have Malcolm X, etc. My point in bringing it up is I have a greater appreciation for Malcolm X. We both read the autobiography together. That as he dictated it to, I think it was Alex Haley, if I remember
Alex
correctly,
Haley.
right? Yeah, and there was and here's one of the conclusions I came from. I understood why he rejected Jesus.
Yeah, if you read, that's why it's important to read directly from the person. Like
Yeah, I
you
mean,
get
I
a more
understood.
holistic view.
Yeah, I understood. Now, again, ultimately, I still believe there's eternal accountability. Ultimately, I still believe in Jesus as the only way, and so forth. But I understood why logically he could not accept Jesus. He could not accept it because the challenge is with what he experienced with his father and how his father was murdered, how the community, a Christian community, quote unquote, did not respond and or speak out regarding that, how his mother was basically driven insane, by
Hmm.
the quote unquote people who were supposed to be helping her after her husband deceased, and the various experiences he had with people who considered themselves to be Christian. Unfortunately, many of the blacks were more docile and just accepting of what was happening around them as well. This is just our lot in life. And then the whites were basically taking advantage of their power position or their supremacy, and they were Christians. And so he could not understand and rationalize, why would I repent of my sin and ask Jesus to be my savior when this is how the people who did that are responding to black and brown people in America? So I see that, which then brings us over into the conversation about Martin, right? So since it's already in line with our conversation, before I get into some major themes and lessons you've learned from Martin, talk about that contrast for a moment. Talk about the contrast between uh, Malcolm and Martin from a legitimate standpoint versus some of the false tension that was created by the media regarding Malcolm and Martin. Talk about that.
Yeah. So I finished the autobiography of Martin Luther King in December. So I just started doing that and combating those narratives. But you see in each of largely their comparisons are based on Malcolm X's position during the Nation of Islam, his ideologies then, versus Martin Luther King during his I Have a Dream 1963
Good.
era. And so you freeze them in
Easy.
these
Come on.
two positions and you don't acknowledge their growth. And so you see, as Martin Luther King, he lived 3 years longer or they were the same age, but he lived 3 years longer. That was killed in 1968. Towards the end of or as he was approaching the end of his life, you see him go back on, and he says that he fears that his American dream has turned into an American nightmare.
Nightmare.
And then Malcolm X, you saw his progression past, hating white devils to hating the system. And as Martin Luther King says in his autobiography, that he saw Malcolm X's growth and he saw that there was a potential for them to come together and their ideologies to merge, but then they killed Malcolm X. So you eliminate that connection.
Okay,
And
stop
so
for a second. Princess. I'm known for jumping in, and I want you to
yeah.
continue on this. I want you to continue on this because I want to reiterate something, and I want you to emphasize this. We know the FBI had wiretaps on both Malcolm and Martin, listening to everything that they were saying and doing privately. Why am I bringing it up? Because they were aware that Malcolm and Martin, their attitudes were changing toward each other. And imagine a black community with
Oh my
these two men. Just imagine what that would mean for white supremacy in America if Martin has changed and evolved, and if Malcolm has changed and evolved, and they actually start working together. So just continue to talk about that.
Yeah, and J. Edgar Hoover, who he was the director of the FBI. There is so much to be said about him, but one of the things he said, and I'm sort of paraphrasing, but basically that there can't be a Black Messiah, and so that I think that was sort of the inspiration behind
Say it
the title
again.
of the
Say it again.
movie,
Say
Judas
it
and
again
Black.
for the people in the back. Say it again
There
for the people
can't
in the
be a
back.
Black Messiah, and so they killed Jesus. Okay, sorry. Anyway, um,
Oh my God.
when you see, okay, so J. Edgar Hoover, there can't be a Black Messiah, and so as these Black leaders begin to change, Martin's message can no longer be whitewashed. You have to eliminate. That's a terrible word. They had to find a way to take care of that. They couldn't allow him to change and to realize his message to no longer be able to be sugarcoated and whitewashed. And so they assassinated him. And so now we only see him as, the dream. He had a dream. He was like, Black and white people, we got to work together. And he woke up. And so that's all we know of Martin. And then Malcolm, he started to change, and he was more so starting to promote Black solidarity. They don't want a Black Messiah, and they don't want Black solidarity. And so you can no longer, as they start agreeing with one another, you can't deny Martin and Malcolm did have intense disagreements. But towards the end of each of their lives, as they start to come together, as you start to see this Black solidarity, they had to take care of that. Like, that couldn't be something that happened. And so I think I might have lost track of the question.
No, you took the question. You took the question and you supersized it with your answer. I mean, you did because growing up in school, you learn. I mean, if you're going to learn anything, you're going to learn that I have a dream. That speech where people are not judged by the color of their skin or judged on the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And I see a day where little Black boys and Black girls are able to sing and join hands with little white girls and white boys and sing in the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty. We are free at last, right? I mean, you had to learn that in high school. And granted, that is, those are the words of Martin Luther King Jr. And as your point earlier, frozen in time. I mean, and he mentioned, to your point, that I'm afraid that this dream has turned into a nightmare, because to your point earlier, what happens when people who don't share the same theology but share the same general ideology and outcome that they desire for their people? And ladies and gentlemen, there's some of you who are watching this live or by replay, and you're a white American, and you're like, where did all this stuff come from? It's history, ladies and gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
It's history. As a matter of fact, the Netflix documentary is out there, the declassification of the FBI files that they had on both Malcolm and Martin. And this isn't stuff that people are making up. This is just you were not taught this history because it was not advantageous to the American narrative that our country was building. So just imagine, just think about that statement for a second. You are the FBI. You're the director of the FBI, the number one internal security organization in the country. You can kill anybody at any time and eliminate them, and nobody even. I mean, you're that guy. And you harbor racist, white supremacist, angry, volatile attitudes toward both Malcolm and Martin. And to Destiny's earlier point, either somebody else was going to kill him or we're going to get him, because there would not be a Black Messiah. There would not be the rise of a powerful, influential Black male who was able to rally Black men and women to a banner of economic strength, solidarity, and unity. We're not going to allow that to happen in America. Why would that be? Why would that be necessary, Destiny, in a country that says we the people? Talk about it. I mean, just like, why would he even need to say that just in that context?
I'm sorry, when you say he, who are you referring to?
Edgar Hoover, yes.
Oh, because you have to keep the white supremacist system. When everyone, not everyone, but when our primary lawmakers, when our primary educators, when everyone at the heads of society is white, they don't want to give up that power. I'm laughing because I don't know. It's just when you think of that mindset, like they will do anything to keep that system, which is why when I don't know if this is a direct connection, but going back to the Americanism, Christianity, white supremacist connection, which is why when you see civil rights movements, when you see Tommy Smith and was it John Carlos do the Black Power fist
Right.
during the 1968 Olympics, when Colin Kaepernick kneels, that's a threat to Americanism, which is then a threat to some people's Christianity, which is then a threat to the white supremacist system. You can't have Black people coming together protesting ours, speaking from some white racist perspectives. You can't have them coming in because then you don't want a Black supremacist system. I mean, that's not even what we're asking for. We're just asking for
Right.
what? Equal opportunity, access, things of that nature. And
Yeah.
so anything that we do that seems like it's the basis of the nation, all men are created equal, we're human, that's a threat to the system that they've built up.
Destiny. I listened to this the other day, and I had to listen to it again and just kind of get my mind right because it is one of the most idiotic statements that I've heard in a while. This particular gentleman made the statement that the Constitution of the United States was and is an aspirational document. I want you to think about this thing. Aspirational, meaning this is who we aspire to be. This is who we want to be. This is in our wildest dreams if we can build a country like this, right? But I got a question. If indeed this statement is accurate, who is it aspirational for?
Yeah.
Because it was very literal for white Americans. It was very literal. Every amendment was for who? Black people and women.
Yeah.
I mean, you weren't making amendments for white men. I mean, there are no amendments to help white men in America. Zero. Why? Because when it says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that statement was made by white men for white men who in turn would transfer that value to their white families.
And
And
even if
until
it
we
were, oh,
go
go
ahead, go
ahead.
ahead, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to say, even if it were an aspirational document, like that in and of itself is ridiculous. Like,
It
why
is.
should
It is.
human beings have to aspire to have equal rights? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Which goes back to my point. It is an idiotic, like you actually opened your mouth and phrased this statement as if it actually was in our cultural phrase, like you were giving a mic drop moment, right? You giving a mic drop moment. No,
Right.
that is dumb. It is because human dignity, black people should not have to aspire to be human in your eyes. And you should not have to aspire to want to see them as being a human in your eye. And you're going to
Mhm.
create a country and exclude them from the influence over the founding, but then use their labor to build the infrastructure and give them daily bread in return so they can be strong to go to work in the morning. So, okay,
And
so,
it
so, so,
speaks to
go ahead, go ahead,
that
go ahead, go ahead.
Black people are expected to have to work from the bottom up to do everything. White, like you see, white privilege. You can white and Carnegie Woodson talks about this in the Miseducation of the Negro. White people and Black people can have the same education, but white people will be able to make more afterwards. And he wrote this in what, 1933? It's
Yeah.
2022 and it still applies. White people, they can have the same education, but white people will make more. White people will have more opportunities after college. et cetera. Whereas Black people are expected, to have this bootstraps mentality. Maybe if you pull yourself up by the bootstraps, maybe if you get an education, maybe if you do this, that, and the third, then you'll be able to do this. Well, we've done this, that, and the third, and we still are struggling. We're still making less than, even if you want to, aside from the fact, this is also something I'm still learning about with like capitalism and capitalism. But if you were to say that, look at billionaires even who supposedly, okay, maybe you want to say they pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. If you want to use them as a model example, they still make less than white billionaires. Like there's discrimination at every single level. It doesn't matter how much we do, which just shows that it's the system.
And see, Princess, to that point, you see I dropped on the screen there, McKinsey's report that the wage gap in America is $220 billion annually between Black and white Americans who have the same or similar job. If that's not systemic, what is it? Because if I've got a bachelor's degree and you got a bachelor's degree and I got 5 years of experience and you've got 5 years experience, our salary should be commensurate with each other. It may be a couple $100 off, or maybe even $1,000 or so off, depending on certain functions, right? Certain dynamics, right? 220 billion? Mm-hmm. $220 billion gap between what Black and white men and women in America make who have the same or a similar job function. To your point about why even Dr. King was assassinated, when he started really connecting social activism to economic strength, when he started making that connection, started understanding and using his words, what's the benefit of having an integrated lunch counter if I can't afford the sandwich that's being offered in the restaurant? What's the benefit of integration if I can't afford to function in that environment? And he began to make that connection. And next thing you know, unfortunately, within 2 years, he's assassinated. And I mean, as a matter of fact, there's a great book out there, and for those of you who want to read it, it's called "Who Killed the Plot to Kill King." I'm sorry, there it is, "The Plot to Kill King," which I'm oh my gosh, but definitely, we can talk about a whole lot. We got to begin to wind down. That's 102. You got to get back to class or another class later, etc. But what I want us to do as we wrap up, we've talked a whole lot about a lot of things, and we've mentioned, white Americans, not necessarily, like you said, not a person, but a system of whiteness, of whiteness that says we control history, we control the narrative. You learn what we want you to learn, how we want you to learn it, and you see the world through this lens because this is the America we want to create, and we're not going to allow you to bring in any other facts that contradict the narrative that we have in place. And they use that tool against, quote unquote, Malcolm, and then created a sanitized version of Martin, something that could be palatable. So what I want you to do in your final remarks, right before you talk about your blog, I want you to talk about how your knowledge of both Malcolm and Martin and how that knowledge has fueled some of the things that you're doing and some of the perspectives that you have right now. Just because, again, we're not just talking about learning stuff for learning stuff, right? We're not just trying to accumulate a lot of head knowledge. Ultimately, we want our world to be better. We want our communities to be better, and we want our lives to be better. So how are you taking this new insight and perspective, and what are you doing with this new insight and this new perspective?
Yeah, I think by learning about Malcolm and Martin and other Black figures that we don't learn as much about, I'm trying to get a more, like I said, the word again, holistic view of activism. So I think especially with Gen Z, and I think it's popularized by Gen Z, but it's used by people of multi-generations. But we have this idea, it's called clicktivism. So where there's a post and you share the post and you think, you're an activist. So you see it a lot during the summer 2020, where you had the Black Square post or these pages, social justice pages, which some of them were largely led by, well, there's nothing wrong per se, but a lot of them were largely led by white people, which not to say there's something wrong with that, but just when you're just sharing a post, it's not necessary, like that doesn't make you an activist. And I think we have this view where we can judge Malcolm for his activism, where we can judge Martin for his activism, Angela Davis, Huey P. Newton, Ida B. Wells, you can keep going on where you judge them. But in our own sense, I feel like we need to take a step back. And I'm not just talking about others, I'm talking about myself as well. We need to take a step back and realize, well, what are we doing? Like, is us just resharing a social media post, is that enough? And so I've been trying to get more deeply into their activism, because it's not just one person can make a movement. I think it's a collective effort by the Black community to, like, just in whatever aspect you can, to be an activist or to do something that helps the Black community. And it also invites the question, like, do Black people have a duty to, and I don't have an answer to this, but do Black people have a duty to their race to be an activist? I think that's something you have to ask of yourself. But for me, I feel like I do have a duty. And by looking at the people that came before me and learning about what they did, the impact that they had, then I can then do better in my own activism and in sharing the information that I learned. And hopefully it inspires others.
No, I mean, that's really good. One of the things you said that was very mature and very wise, which is all of us, including yourself, need to take a step back. We all need to take a step back and just kind of have that semi-transcendent experience, right? Where we're kind of stepping back and looking at what's happening, looking at what we're doing, and then asking ourselves the question, what are we improving? What are we doing? What benefit is happening, as opposed to your point, collectivism. I dropped that in the feed as well. Great perspective to go back and look at. And my thought has been, we can always learn from the past, whether we supported it, agreed, disagreed. We can learn from it and then become better people as a community, and even as a nation, as it relates to maybe some level of macro engagement with some of these very challenging facts, basically, because we're not talking about opinion. We're talking about these are things that actually happened. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in the Ford Theater, right? That's a fact. You can't argue about that. You can argue about why he was assassinated, but you can't argue about the fact that he was. You can't argue about that. The fact is, Dr. King and Malcolm X were both assassinated, and our federal government was complicit in both assassinations, not only by what they did, but also by what they intentionally did not do at the behest of J. Edgar Hoover. I mean, those are facts. I don't have to like it, but those are facts. So on your blog, What's Our Destiny, which again, those of you going, I've dropped the post about it, go and follow and subscribe to the blog, What's Our Destiny. You talk about a lot of these things. You share this history, reconciling and or learning from the past, bringing it to the present, and talking about where we're going. So talk, or as a matter of fact, not just talk, you're going to provide the wrap-up comments. It's 1:08 p.m. We're right at an hour. So provide the wrap-up comments by telling us about your blog, how to find it, why we should go there, and whatever else you want to share.
Yeah. So the blog is at www.what'sourdestiny.com. You can also follow me at What's Our Destiny on Instagram and Facebook. And I highly suggest also like subscribing on the website as well as following on social media, because whereas I don't post a blog like every couple of weeks or things or something of that nature, I do try to do social media posts. So this month, for the month of February, I'll be posting, the theme for this month is health and wellness. So we're going to look at Black women's effects on the medical field, which will be posted tomorrow. And then this month, I actually talked to a series of Duke students and interviewed them about mental health and wellness in the Black community, which, there's a large stigma around. So I inspired some conversation around the topic, and I'll be editing all weekend, but hopefully it comes out either March 1st or March 2nd as a wrap up to Black History Month, and that will be on the Instagram and the Facebook pages. And also, my 2-year anniversary is coming up on May 19th, which is Malcolm X's birthday. I'm hoping to secure a collab that I've been looking at for a while, but if not, that particular person is still going to be something great. So follow my blog, be added to the email subscriber list, and on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome, awesome. Princess, you did an amazing job. Destiny Benjamin did an amazing job. You guys drop some emojis in the chat. Come on,
Thank
right
you.
there, Facebook, YouTube, whether you're watching us live or in replay, drop a chat. As a matter of fact, drop your questions as well. If you have some questions in there that may be about Malcolm or Martin, etc.,
Oh, yes.
drop some questions in that chat. Tag Destiny in that question and give her opportunity to respond, to your questions and so forth. We appreciate it. We encourage in our house, we encourage dialogue, we encourage debate in our household. Now it's gonna be respectful now. I mean, because they ain't but two parents, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they ain't but two. They ain't but two, but we encourage, independent thought, right? And we believe the truth will prevail, right? The
Mhm.
truth is not afraid of being criticized and examined. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and he is unafraid of being criticized or examined because he can stand any level of criticism. The Bible says the word of God is tried 7 times and comes out on top. So God bless you. Destiny, I love you. We'll see you next weekend.
Love you
We'll
too.
see you next
Yes.
weekend. You guys give a shout out. Make sure you follow Destiny on IG, follow her blog on IG and Facebook. Go to the website and subscribe on the website. Do that. And then once you do it, come back to the post. I mean, it takes what? This is 60 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. And drop a chat, drop an emoji, say, hey, done. Got it? Do that for us. Let's help her get this message out. Okay. Princess, I love you. You did an amazing job. Everybody, God bless you. We'll see
Love
you
you too.
in the
Thank
rewind.
you.
You're welcome, baby. Black Friday conversation.